The Apache woman said, "Do you still remember me?" The lone cowboy fell silent upon seeing her. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the dusty town. Wooden buildings, worn by years of wind and rain, lined the single main street. A few townsfolk moved slowly, finishing their daily chores, their faces shaded under wide-brimmed hats. The air smelled faintly of smoke from a nearby blacksmith's forge and the dry earth of the surrounding plains. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and every new face quickly became the talk of the town. A lone figure appeared at the edge of town. He moved steadily, without rush, his boots stirring up little clouds of dust with each step. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple but sturdy shirt and worn leather pants. A weathered hat shaded his face, but his eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing. He carried the air of someone who had walked many miles alone, who had seen more than he let on. People glanced at him as he passed, some whispering, others simply watching with quiet curiosity. He did not belong to this town. That much was clear. As he reached the small trading post, he paused, resting his hands on the worn wooden counter. Inside, the smell of dried herbs, leather, and flour mixed in a way that was oddly comforting. The shopkeeper, an older man with a graying beard, looked up from his ledger and gave a cautious nod. "You knew around here?" he asked. The cowboy gave a small nod, his voice low but steady. "Just passing through." The shopkeeper studied him for a moment, then returned to his writing. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, carrying with it the distant sound of hoofbeats and the rustle of prairie grass. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and the cowboy felt it in his chest. Years of wandering had made him sensitive to silence. It often meant something was coming, though he could not say exactly what. And then he heard a voice. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but there was a firmness behind it that made him stop in his tracks. "Do you still remember me?" He turned slowly, his hand unconsciously moving toward the edge of his hat, unsure whether to lift it or not. The voice came again, closer now, carrying a mixture of hope and a quiet sadness. He saw her then, standing a few feet away. She was an Apache woman, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders. Her eyes were steady, watching him intently, as if searching for the man she once knew. For a moment, the cowboy could not speak. His mind flashed back to a time long ago, a time when life had been simpler in some ways, though not easy. He remembered the small Apache community nestled along a river, the laughter of children running through the open spaces, the careful work of the women weaving and preparing food, and the elders sitting quietly, sharing their stories. And he remembered her, young, strong, and proud, with eyes that seemed to see straight into his heart. He had been just another traveler back then, moving through their land for work, for survival, for reasons he had not even fully understood. Yet somehow, in the midst of all the uncertainty, he had found a connection with her. A quiet friendship had grown, built on trust and small acts of help, on shared moments of laughter and quiet understanding. He had thought it fleeting, a brief encounter in the long road of his life, but now, standing here, he realized how deeply that time had stayed with him. The woman's voice broke through his thoughts again. "It has been many years," she said softly, "but I never forgot you." His throat felt dry. Words caught somewhere between memory and emotion. He wanted to speak, to explain, to ask why she was here, but none of it came. Instead, he simply nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the past that neither of them could undo. Around them, the town seemed to hold its breath. A few townsfolk had noticed the exchange, but they gave space, sensing that this was not an ordinary reunion. There was something unspoken between the two of them, something that demanded respect and quiet. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I heard someone might be passing through," she said, "and I hoped it might be you." There was a gentle strength in her voice, a calm certainty that he had remembered her not just as a fleeting part of his past, but as someone who had mattered. He finally found his voice, low and measured. I did not expect to see you here." "I did not expect to see you either," she admitted, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "But here you are, and I had to know, did you remember?" He looked away for a moment, feeling the weight of the years pressing on him. He remembered the laughter, the quiet nights by the fire, the shared stories, and the unspoken understanding that had existed between them. "I did," he finally said. "I have never forgotten." The woman nodded, her expression softening. "Neither have I," she said simply. They stood in silence for a while, the sounds of the town continuing around them but somehow distant, as if the moment belonged only to the two of them. The wind stirred the dust at their feet, carrying memories of the past and a sense of something uncertain yet important in the present. The cowboy took a step back, adjusting his hat. "I am just passing through," he said again, as if trying to ground himself in the reality of the present. But the words felt hollow. He could not simply pass through this town, not with her here, not after all these years. The woman's gaze softened but remained steady. "Then we will make the most of the time we have," she said. Her tone was gentle but resolute, a quiet challenge that matched the strength he remembered from long ago. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the main street, the cowboy and the Apache woman remained there, facing each other, caught between the past and the present. Neither spoke, yet each understood that this encounter was more than chance. It was a reminder of connections that endure, of moments that shape who we are, and of the unspoken bonds that can survive even the longest separations. The town continued its quiet evening, unaware of the significance of this meeting. Children's laughter floated faintly from the far edge of the street, and the blacksmith's hammer rang softly in the distance. Yet for the cowboy, the world had narrowed to the figure standing before him. For her, it had narrowed to him. Time and distance had stretched between them, but now, in this shared moment, it felt as though no time at all had passed. Finally, he spoke again, his voice steadier this time. I remember everything," he said. "I remember the people, the place, and I remember you." She smiled, a small, bittersweet smile. "Then we will start from here," she said. "Whatever comes next, we will face it together." For the first time in many years, the cowboy allowed himself a small sense of hope. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew that the past had returned to him in the form of someone who mattered. And in that dusty little town, under the fading light of the setting sun, two lives converged once more, beginning a story that had been waiting for this moment to be told. The wind had begun to die down, and the soft glow of twilight spread across the town. Shadows stretched long along the wooden sidewalks, and the faint smell of cooking fires drifted through the air. The cowboy and the Apache woman stood facing each other in the middle of the street, the quiet hum of the town fading into the background. Time seemed suspended, as if the world had agreed to give them this moment alone. "Do you remember the river?" she asked suddenly, her voice gentle but filled with memory. He blinked, and the past came rushing back in a flood of images. A small, winding river running through open plains, the water shining under the midday sun. He remembered the smell of wet grass, the cool touch of the water against his boots, and the laughter of children playing along the banks. And he remembered her standing at the edge of the water, her hair catching the sunlight, her eyes full of quiet strength. "I do," he said softly. "I remember the river and the people there." She nodded, her gaze fixed on him. "I wondered if you ever thought about us, about the time you spent here." He hesitated, the memories feeling heavy yet comforting. "I thought about it more than I ever could have said," he admitted. "Every time I moved to a new place, every town I passed through, I remembered your faces, your stories, your kindness. I wondered if I had done the right thing by leaving." Her lips pressed together, and she nodded slowly. "Life does not always give us the choices we want," she said. "You had your path to follow, and I had mine, but the memories, they never left me." The cowboy took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years pressing on him. He remembered arriving in their community as a young man, tired and worn from months of traveling. He had carried no illusions about life, no great dreams beyond survival and the next meal. But there, in that small Apache settlement, he had found something he had not expected: acceptance, friendship, and even moments of joy that had seemed impossible on the road. He remembered the elders, sitting in the shade of the great oaks, sharing stories of their ancestors. He remembered the women teaching their children to weave, their fingers moving skillfully as they passed down generations of knowledge. And he remembered her, always present, observing him quietly at first, and slowly drawing him into the life of the community. She had a way of speaking that was calm but firm, her words always carrying a weight of thoughtfulness. "You helped us in ways you may not even remember," she said, her voice soft but steady. "When the men went out to hunt and some families were struggling, you offered to help without asking for anything in return. You listened to our stories, laughed at our jokes, and never judged us for being who we were. You became part of our lives without even trying." He felt a lump in his throat. "I did what I could," he said quietly, "but I had to leave. I had no choice. There were things I had to face, places I had to go. I never wanted to leave you behind, but it was not my decision alone." She studied him for a moment, her dark eyes searching his face. "I knew you had your reasons," she said, "and though it hurt, I understood. Still, there were nights when I wondered if you would ever return. Nights when I imagined you might walk back through the trees, smiling as if nothing had changed. And when you didn't come, I learned to carry on, to live as best as I could." The cowboy swallowed hard, remembering the long journey that had taken him away from them. He had traveled hundreds of miles, through dry plains, rugged mountains, and lonely deserts. He had faced storms, hunger, and danger along the way, and yet through it all, the memory of her and the community he had left behind had never left him. It had been a constant presence in his heart, a quiet reminder of the connection he had once known. "I never forgot," he said again, his voice steady now, carrying the weight of truth. "Not a day went by that I didn't think about you, about your people, about the river and the sky and the laughter that filled the air. I regretted leaving, more than I can say." A small smile touched her lips, and for a moment the tension between them eased. "We all have regrets," she said, "but regret is not the same as forgetting. You may have left in body, but you never left in heart. That is what matters most." They began to walk slowly along the street, the sounds of the town blending with the gentle evening breeze. He noticed the changes immediately. New buildings had sprung up, the trading post had expanded, and yet some things remained the same. The warm glow of lanterns in windows, the quiet kindness of neighbors, the sense of community that seemed to endure despite the passage of time. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you stayed?" she asked, her voice quiet. He looked away, his gaze drifting to the distant hills. "Every now and then," he admitted, "but life doesn't give us those choices. We take the path that is set before us, and we try to do the best we can. Staying might have been easier, but it would not have been the life I was meant to live. I can only hope that the life I lived somehow honored what I left behind." She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "We all walk our own paths," she said. "Some paths cross again and some do not. What matters is what we do with the time we are given." The cowboy paused, turning to look at her. "I never thought I would see you again," he said softly. "I did not even know if you would remember me." "I remembered," she said simply. "I remembered every moment. The kindness you showed, the stories you shared, the laughter we had. You may have left, but you left a mark that stayed with me. And now here you are." For a while they walked in silence, their steps echoing softly against the wooden sidewalks. The past had been heavy, filled with longing and questions that had gone unanswered. But now, in the quiet of the evening, it felt lighter. The memories were no longer just fragments of the past. They were shared experiences that had shaped both of them, and now they could speak of them openly. He thought of the nights by the river, the quiet conversations under the stars, and the moments of laughter that had felt like a brief escape from the harshness of the world. He thought of the lessons he had learned, the humility he had gained, and the understanding that had stayed with him all these years. And he realized that, in many ways, meeting her again was like returning to a home he had thought he had lost forever. "You were always brave," he said finally, his voice full of admiration. "I remember the way you faced challenges, the way you cared for your people, the way you never gave up even when times were hard. I hope I can be even half as strong as you were." She shook her head gently. "Strength comes in many forms," she said. "You may not have stayed physically, but you showed strength in leaving when it was necessary, in surviving the road, in remembering and honoring what mattered to you. We all have our ways of being brave." The cowboy looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and humility in his eyes. "I am glad to see you," he said simply. "I am glad you are still here, still strong, still living." She smiled, the shadows of the evening softening her features. "And I am glad you came back, even if just for a while. The world is bigger than any one place, but connections, true connections, they endure, no matter how far apart we may be." As darkness began to settle over the town, lanterns flickering to life along the street, the two of them stood together, not needing to speak, not needing to explain. The past had returned in their meeting, and the future was uncertain, but in that moment they had each other's presence, and that was enough. The stars began to appear, one by one, as the sun disappeared completely behind the hills. The quiet of the evening was filled with memories and a shared understanding that some bonds cannot be broken, no matter how much time has passed. For the cowboy, the encounter was a reminder of the life he had once touched and the people who had shaped him. For the Apache woman, it was a confirmation that memories and connections endure, even when circumstances separate lives for many years. And together they walked forward slowly, carrying the past in their hearts, ready to face whatever the present might bring. The next morning, the town slowly came to life under the pale light of dawn. Birds chirped from the rooftops, and the faint smell of baking bread floated from the small bakery near the center of the street. The cowboy had not slept much. His mind was filled with memories of the night before, and with thoughts of what might come next. He had expected a simple reunion, a brief meeting before he continued on his journey, but he quickly realized that life in this town had grown more complicated than he had anticipated. The Apache woman approached him just as he was about to leave his small room at the boarding house. "There is something you should see," she said, her tone serious yet calm. Her eyes were steady, and the cowboy could tell that this was not a trivial matter. He followed her down the quiet streets. The town seemed peaceful at first, but as they moved closer to the outskirts, he noticed subtle signs of tension. Windows were shuttered, and a few townsfolk moved nervously, glancing toward the hills that bordered the town. The cowboy felt a familiar unease settle in his chest. Something was happening here, something that required attention and possibly action. At the edge of the town, near a small cluster of wooden warehouses, a group of men had gathered. They were not part of the town's usual population, and their presence was immediately suspicious. They moved with a confidence that suggested they believed themselves in control, and the townsfolk kept a careful distance. The Apache woman slowed, allowing the cowboy to take in the scene before speaking. "They've been coming for weeks," she said quietly, "trying to push the town, taking what they want without asking. The town elders have tried to reason with them, but it hasn't worked." The cowboy studied the men. They were rough-looking, carrying heavy tools and supplies, but there was no immediate violence in their behavior. It was the kind of quiet pressure that could escalate quickly, the kind of situation that could spiral out of control if not handled carefully. "I see," he said simply. He was no stranger to tense situations, having traveled through countless towns and settlements where lawlessness sometimes ruled. He had learned to read people, to understand when words could calm a situation and when action was necessary. "They took some of our food and supplies last night," the woman continued. "The elders want to avoid conflict, but we cannot allow this to continue." The cowboy nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We need a plan," he said, "not just for today but for the future. They'll come back, and next time they may not be as careful." She looked at him, a mixture of relief and admiration in her eyes. "I thought you might say that," she said. "I knew you would know what to do." They spent the morning observing the men, noting their movements and their patterns. The townsfolk watched from a distance, some whispering among themselves, others simply hoping the situation would resolve without violence. The cowboy worked quietly, analyzing the situation, thinking several steps ahead. By midday, it was clear that a confrontation was unavoidable. The men were growing bolder, speaking loudly and making demands of anyone who came near. The Apache woman approached the leader of the group, speaking calmly and firmly, trying to negotiate. The cowboy stayed back, ready to intervene if needed, his hand resting lightly on the worn leather of his belt. "Please," she said, her voice steady, "we are a small community. Take what you need, but do not harm the town or its people. There is enough for everyone if we work together." The leader laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Work together? This town is weak. We take what we want, and there is nothing you can do to stop us." The cowboy stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "There's no need for trouble. You can take what you need, but respect the town and the people who live here. Otherwise, it will not end well for you." The men paused, sizing him up. There was something in his eyes, a quiet strength and confidence that made them hesitate. They had clearly underestimated the town and its people, and now they realized that someone in this place was not willing to back down. For a tense moment, there was silence. Then the leader of the men gave a sharp nod, and the others relaxed slightly. They were not completely intimidated, but they recognized that their usual tactics would not work here. The cowboy and the Apache woman had shown a calm authority, a clear understanding of what was at stake, and that earned their respect. Over the next few hours, the situation slowly improved. The cowboy worked with the townsfolk to organize supplies, creating clear boundaries for what could be taken and what was to remain for the town's survival. The Apache woman moved among the people, offering encouragement and guidance, helping them to stay calm and focused. Together, they demonstrated a quiet leadership that began to shift the balance of power. By evening, the men had left, taking only what had been offered and respecting the limits set by the town. There was no violence, no unnecessary confrontation, only a careful negotiation that had prevented disaster. The townsfolk breathed a collective sigh of relief, their gratitude clear in their expressions and gestures. The cowboy and the Apache woman stood together, watching the sun dip below the hills once more. The town was safe for now, but both of them knew that this was only a temporary peace. There would be challenges ahead, and they would need to remain vigilant. "You handled that well," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I did not know if it would end this way." He shook his head slightly. "We handled it together," he said. "You were just as important in this as I was. Your people trusted you, and that made all the difference." She smiled softly, a small but genuine expression of warmth. "It feels good to work together again, even after all these years." For a long moment they simply stood there, side by side, watching the town settle into evening. There was a sense of shared purpose, of understanding, and of renewed connection. They had faced a challenge together, and in doing so, had reaffirmed the bond that had begun so many years ago by the river. That night, as the stars appeared one by one in the clear sky, the cowboy reflected on the day. He had come to the town expecting a brief reunion, a few quiet moments to remember the past. Instead, he had found himself drawn back into a community, into a life that demanded courage, wisdom, and compassion. And he realized that perhaps this was why he had returned, not to dwell on what had been lost, but to help protect what was still alive and worth fighting for. The Apache woman, too, sat quietly in her small home, thinking of the day's events. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, but she had done so with courage, guided by the memory of someone who had once been a friend, a companion, and a trusted ally. She felt a sense of relief and gratitude, knowing that the cowboy was not just a memory of the past, but a presence in the present, someone who could stand beside her when it mattered most. Over the next few days, the town began to stabilize. Supplies were organized, responsibilities were shared, and the people worked together in a renewed spirit of cooperation. The cowboy moved among them, offering guidance, lending a hand where needed, and quietly observing to ensure that the peace would last. The Apache woman continued to support her people, her calm strength inspiring confidence and determination. Through it all, a quiet friendship began to deepen again between them. They spoke of practical matters, of strategies for the town's safety, and of plans to ensure that the men who had come would not return. But they also spoke of smaller, simpler things, stories from the past, moments of humor, and reflections on the lessons life had taught them. It became clear that their reunion was more than just a meeting of old friends. It was a reminder that life, even after years of separation, could bring people together again in meaningful ways. And as the days passed, the bond between them grew stronger, rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and a renewed sense of purpose. The town remained quiet, peaceful for the first time in weeks, but both the cowboy and the Apache woman knew that challenges could return at any moment. Yet now, they faced the future with confidence, knowing that together, they could meet whatever came their way. And in that quiet strength, there was a sense of hope, a belief that even in a world filled with uncertainty, courage, compassion, and connection could make a lasting difference. By the time the sun set completely, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the town had settled into a calm evening. The cowboy and the Apache woman stood at the edge of the street, watching as the lights flickered in the windows and the town slowly prepared for night. They shared a quiet smile, a silent acknowledgement of what they had accomplished together and of the bond that had survived years of separation. In the heart of the town, among the people who had faced fear and uncertainty, there was a sense of peace, hard-earned and fragile yet real. And for the cowboy and the Apache woman, there was a deeper understanding that sometimes life's challenges were not just obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to reconnect, to rebuild, and to rediscover what truly mattered. The town had quieted, leaving only the gentle hum of evening life. Lanterns glowed softly along the streets, and the air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and fresh bread from the bakeries. The cowboy walked slowly toward the small adobe house at the edge of town where the Apache woman lived. He had spent the day helping the townsfolk organize supplies and repair fences, but tonight felt different. Tonight was for the conversation that both had been avoiding, the conversation that could finally bridge the years they had spent apart. She greeted him at the door with a small nod, her expression calm but attentive. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside to let him enter. The house was simple but comfortable, filled with handmade furniture, colorful blankets, and the quiet warmth of a home cared for with love. The walls were adorned with woven tapestries and drawings made by the children of her community, reminders of life's small joys even in difficult times. He stepped inside, feeling the familiar yet distant sense of connection to this place. Memories of long ago filled his mind, nights by the fire, the sound of her voice telling stories, the gentle laughter of children as they played near the river. He realized how much he had missed this life, how much he had carried the memory of it with him across the miles. They sat together on a wooden bench near the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across the room, creating an atmosphere of warmth and quiet intimacy. Neither spoke for a few moments, each lost in thought, each aware of the delicate balance between the past and the present. "I have thought about you many times," the cowboy began finally, his voice low but steady. "About what you must have gone through and about how I left. There were so many moments I wished I could go back and do differently." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting both understanding and curiosity. "I have wondered too," she said softly, "about why you left, what your life has been like, and whether you ever remembered us. But we all have paths we must follow. Yours was not here and mine was. I learned to carry on, to live, to survive. And yet, it has always been important to remember, to honor the past." He nodded, a deep sense of regret and relief mixing in his chest. "I never forgot. Not a day went by that I didn't think of you, of the people, the river, the laughter and the struggles. Leaving was necessary, but it was never easy. I carried the memory with me, and it shaped every step I took." She reached out, placing a hand gently on his. "And that is why you returned," she said quietly. "Not just to see me, but to reconnect with something that never truly left you. That bond, that memory, it called you back." For a while they sat in silence, the only sounds the soft crackle of the fire and the distant calls of night birds outside. There was no rush, no pressure to speak. They were simply present with one another, allowing the years of separation to be acknowledged without judgment. "I have seen so many changes in the world," she continued, her voice calm but thoughtful. "People come and go, towns grow and fade, but some things remain. Courage, kindness, loyalty, those are what endure. You showed those things when you were here before, and you continue to show them now." He felt a warmth in his chest at her words, a validation he had longed for but never expected. "I did what I could," he said humbly, "but it was never enough. I always feared that leaving might have caused more harm than good." "Life is rarely perfect," she said gently. "What matters is how we respond, how we choose to act with the time and opportunities we are given. You left, yes, but you carried respect, care, and memory. That is more than most can claim." The cowboy's gaze drifted to the small window beside them. Outside, the stars shone brightly, their light reflecting off the quiet plains that stretched beyond the town. He remembered nights spent under similar skies long ago, sitting by the river, sharing stories with her and the others. Those memories were not just nostalgic, they were lessons, shaping his understanding of the world and of himself. "I wish I could have stayed," he said softly. "I wish I could have helped more, learned more, been here for all of it, but life had other plans and I had to follow them. Still, I have never stopped caring, never stopped remembering." She squeezed his hand gently. "And now you are here," she said, "and that matters. What happened before is part of the story, yes, but it does not define the present or the future. We can honor the past and still move forward." For the first time in many years, he felt a sense of peace he had not known. The regret that had weighed so heavily on his heart seemed lighter, softened by her understanding and the shared acknowledgement of their journey. He realized that reconciliation was not about erasing the past but about accepting it, learning from it, and using it to strengthen the present. "I want to know everything," he said finally. "Tell me about the town, about your people, about the life you have lived since I left." She smiled, a small, bittersweet smile. "There is much to tell," she said. "The town has grown, yes, but it has also faced challenges. We have struggled with outsiders, with shortages, with the changes that come too quickly, but we have survived. And we have learned to rely on each other, to trust in our strength and our wisdom." He listened intently, absorbing every word. He asked questions, not to judge, but to understand. And as she spoke, he realized how much she had grown, how resilient and wise she had become in the years since their separation. Her life had not been easy, yet she had faced it with courage and integrity, shaping her community into a place of strength and care. "And you," she asked gently, "tell me about your journey. What did you learn? What did you see? What did you carry with you?" He spoke slowly, carefully, recounting the towns and lands he had traveled, the people he had met, the lessons he had learned along the way. He spoke of hardship and triumph, of loneliness and unexpected kindness, of the quiet moments that had stayed with him long after the noise of the road had faded. And as he spoke, she listened with the same attentive care he had always remembered, her presence offering him a sense of acceptance and understanding he had rarely found elsewhere. By the time he finished, the fire had burned low, leaving a warm glow that softened the edges of the room. There was a quiet satisfaction in their conversation, a feeling that some of the distance between them had been bridged. They had acknowledged the pain, the regrets, and the separations of the past, and in doing so, they had strengthened the bond that had never truly been broken. "You have changed," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "But in the ways that matter, you are still the same. Strong, kind, and honest, and you have never forgotten what is important." He smiled faintly, feeling the weight of years lifting slightly from his shoulders. "And you," he said, "have become even stronger than I remember. You have guided your people with wisdom and courage. I am honored to see what you have built, what you have endured." There was a long silence, but it was no longer heavy with unspoken words. It was a comfortable silence, filled with understanding and mutual respect. They had faced the past, acknowledged it, and found a way to connect across the years. And in that connection, there was hope for the present, and hope for whatever the future might bring. As the night deepened, they rose together, stepping outside into the cool air. The town slept quietly, safe for now, but both knew that challenges would come again. Yet they also knew that they could face them, together if necessary, or with the strength they had each cultivated over the years. For the cowboy, the night was a turning point. He had reconciled with his past, with the choices he had made, and with the person who had once been such a vital part of his life. For the Apache woman, it was also a turning point, a confirmation that connection, memory, and shared experience could endure, even across great distance and time. They stood together for a while, gazing at the stars, feeling the quiet strength of the land around them. Words were no longer necessary. The bond between them spoke more clearly than any conversation could. And as they turned to head back inside, they both carried with them a renewed understanding of each other, of themselves, and of the enduring power of compassion, courage, and memory. In that quiet moment, beneath the vast sky and the gentle glow of the town, the past and present merged, creating a foundation for whatever lay ahead. They had faced separation, uncertainty, and challenge, and now they had found reconciliation, understanding, and a shared sense of purpose. And in that, there was a peace that neither time nor distance could take away. The first light of dawn stretched across the town, painting the wooden buildings and dirt streets in soft gold. A cool breeze drifted in from the plains, carrying the fresh smell of morning grass and distant wildflowers. The town stirred gently, with merchants opening shutters, children running to fetch water, and the faint clatter of horseshoes on the main street. But for the cowboy, the quiet hum of daily life felt different this morning. He had slept little, not because of restlessness, but because he knew that soon he would have to leave. The Apache woman was already awake when he stepped outside, standing at the edge of her small garden. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their colors bright and alive against the soft light of morning. She turned as he approached, offering a calm but knowing smile. Neither spoke immediately, the moment heavy with unspoken understanding. "You don't have to go yet," she said quietly, almost as if testing him. He shook his head, the weight of the decision clear in his eyes. "I promised myself I would move on, and there are still miles to travel, people to help, and roads to walk," he said softly. "But leaving is always the hardest part, especially now." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand," she said. "Life has paths we must follow, even if it means leaving behind what we care about most. But before you go, there is something I want you to know." He stopped and looked at her, sensing the depth of her words. "What is it?" "I am proud of you," she said simply, her voice calm but full of meaning. "Not just for what you did for the town, or for helping the people, or for the courage you've shown over the years. I am proud of you because you never forgot. You never forgot the past, the people, the bonds that truly matter. You carried them with you, even across all the miles and the years. That is strength in its purest form." The cowboy felt a lump rise in his throat. He had spent so long believing that leaving had been a mistake, that he had failed in some way by not staying. But her words softened that burden, reminding him that memory and respect could be as powerful as presence, and that actions, even from afar, could carry meaning. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said quietly. "About this place, about the people, and about the river, about you. And now, seeing you again, I realize that some things truly endure, no matter how much time passes." She smiled, a small, bittersweet curve of her lips. "And some things are worth returning to, even if only for a short while," she said. They walked together through the quiet streets, taking in the town one last time from his perspective. The buildings were familiar yet changed, a mixture of old memories and new growth. Children ran past them, laughing and shouting as they chased each other around corners. Merchants arranged their goods in the stalls, their hands skilled from years of work. The town was alive, resilient, and thriving, much like her, and much like the bond they shared. "You have done more than you know," she said softly as they passed the trading post. "The town has grown stronger because of you and because of the hope you brought back with you. Even in your short time here, you made a difference." He shook his head humbly. "I did not do this alone," he said. "You guided your people, kept them safe, gave them courage. I was only a small part. The real strength has always been here in the people and in you." They reached the edge of town, where the open plain stretched out endlessly under the morning sky. The air smelled of wild grass, distant pine, and the faint river that ran nearby. He could feel the pull of the road, the call of the horizon, the promise of new places and new people waiting. Yet standing here, he felt a quiet sorrow, a heaviness that came with leaving someone he had cared for deeply. "You must go," she said finally, breaking the silence. "And I must let you. Life does not always allow us to stay where we belong, and the road is yours to walk. But know this, you are always welcome here. You have a place in this town, in this life, and in the hearts of those you touched." He nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "I will never forget," he said simply. "I will carry this with me always." For a moment neither moved, as if the world itself had paused to honor their connection. Then she reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, a gentle, grounding touch. "Go with courage," she said, "and return to your path with hope, knowing that the bonds you carry are strong enough to last any journey." He nodded again, his heart heavy but steady. "I will," he said, "and thank you for everything." With a final, lingering look at her and the town, the cowboy turned and began walking toward the horizon. His boots stirred up small clouds of dust with each step, the sound echoing softly in the quiet morning. Behind him, the Apache woman watched, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She felt a mix of sorrow and hope, sorrow at the departure of someone she had cherished, and hope that the world would treat him kindly, that his journeys would be safe, and that their paths might cross again one day. As he moved further away, the cowboy allowed himself a deep breath, feeling the wind on his face and the warmth of the sun on his back. He reflected on the days he had spent here, on the struggles they had faced together, on the conversations that had brought healing, and on the quiet moments of understanding that had strengthened both of them. He realized that life's paths were not just about destinations or achievements, but about connection, care, and the courage to honor the past while moving forward. The plain stretched endlessly ahead, golden under the morning sun, dotted with wildflowers and the shadows of distant hills. Each step he took felt both heavy and light, heavy with the weight of leaving, and light with the freedom of knowing that he carried a piece of home, a piece of her, and a piece of the town with him. Meanwhile, the Apache woman returned to her home, tending to the garden and the small fires that would prepare breakfast for her people. Yet her mind lingered on the cowboy, on the strength and courage he had shown, and on the bond that had never truly faded. She understood that some people, some connections, do not need constant presence to remain alive. They endure in memory, in shared experience, and in the quiet acknowledgement of their importance. Days passed, and the cowboy continued his journey. He traveled through plains, forests, and small towns, always carrying the memories of the Apache woman and the town with him. Each encounter along the way reminded him of what truly mattered: courage, kindness, respect, and the bonds that define a life. He found himself helping where he could, listening when others needed a voice, and walking steadily, guided by the lessons of the past and the quiet strength he had gained from his reunion. And though miles separated them, both the cowboy and the Apache woman felt the enduring presence of the other. Letters traveled slowly across the territory, messages shared between friends, recounting the small victories, the struggles, and the simple joys of life. Each letter reminded them that distance could never erase memory, that true bonds survive even time and space. One evening, months later, the cowboy found himself standing on a ridge overlooking a familiar river. The water shimmered in the sunlight, winding gently across the plains, and for a moment he was transported back to the days of his youth, to the time before he had left, and to the woman who had shaped his heart. He smiled softly, remembering the words she had spoken, that courage, memory, and connection endure, no matter the road ahead. He realized then that life was not about permanence, nor about never leaving. It was about understanding, about honoring what is important, about carrying the past with you while embracing the future. And in that understanding, he found peace, a peace that would guide him on every road he walked, every town he entered, and every person he met. Back in the town, the Apache woman stood at the edge of the river, watching the sun rise in golden brilliance. She thought of the cowboy, of his journey, and of the ways in which their lives had intersected. She felt no sadness now, only gratitude for the past they had shared, for the lessons learned, and for the bond that would endure, silently but powerfully, across any distance. And so, the cowboy continued his journey, the plains stretching endlessly before him, while the Apache woman returned to her life in the town she had nurtured and protected. Both carried with them the strength of memory, the warmth of connection, and the understanding that some bonds once formed never truly fade. The horizon glowed softly, a reminder that life moves forward, that journeys continue, and that even in parting there can be hope, gratitude, and peace. And in the hearts of both the cowboy and the Apache woman, the past and present existed together, a quiet, enduring story of courage, compassion, and the timeless power of human connection.